You are at war with yourself and likely don't realize it. Your thoughts, beliefs, habits, and actions often sabotage you. Are they helping you overcome adversity or setting you up for failure? To win this battle, you must connect with your inner warrior. We all have a warrior within us, one that strengthens our resolve and helps us to rise to meet life's challenges. If you're just surviving rather than thriving, then it's time to embrace the warrior archetype, live the warrior ethos, and ascend. If you are a veteran, first responder, or someone looking to take charge of your life, find your tribe, and then be the hero of your own story, this podcast is for you. Join Mike Kinney and Matt Hastings, two retired U.S. Army officers who served in U.S. Army Special Operations and Army Aviation units, as they share with you optimal performance practices they learned in their time with the Military and Warriors Ascent, a 501c3 nonprofit that helps veterans and warriors with PTS.
All right, well, hello, everyone. I'm Mike Kinney. This is Matt Hastings.
Boom.
This is the Warriors Ascent podcast. So we're two former military guys, retired from the U.S. Army, and we're here to talk about warrior stuff.
Warrior stuff.
Warrior stuff. No, so the warrior archetype, warrior ethos, self-care, and a variety of things.
Kind of a season rundown on what we've done, right?
It is, right. So this is 10. So this will be a recapitulation of what it is that we've spoken about. So let me start off by asking, has anyone in the audience, you ever felt like, hey man, you're going through the motions, you're like, I'm going to say languishing. We talked about it, I think last episode or so, but like something is not quite right. I don't feel horrible, but I don't feel like I'm really executing very well. Whether it be motivation, it might be energy. It could be direction, like, all right, hey, what am I doing? I'm just going through the motions. Could be a variety of things. If anyone out there has felt like that at one time, you're in good company. We all have.
Right.
We're pretty high-performing guys, so we think. Well, this episode, it's going to be a recap of what it is that we spoke to in previous episodes. So if you want the more details, see the previous episodes where we break things out in a little bit more granularity. But the intent behind this episode is, hey, help, I'll say maybe diagnose where maybe things are deficient, why it is that maybe your motivation's waning, your energy's waning, and what it is that you can do about it. So mind, body, and soul, that is what we're about, in terms of our holistic approach to mental health, well-being, and just, I'll say, embracing the warrior archetype and living the warrior ethos. So
I like how you talk about a diagnosis, little self-diagnosis,
Yeah. Now we're not docs, so
No.
just let me put that caveat on
Kind of
that. We're not PhDs, we're not psychologists, so diagnosis.
Or a car diagnostic center.
Kind of like mechanics, right?
Yeah, mechanics,
exactly.
more of a mechanic.
Right, exactly. I mean, you know, as a former aviator, I mean, I'm sure you can, attest to that. But so we're going to approach this episode really from the perspective of looking back on what it is that we discussed, kind of using that as I'll say a rubric or an optic through which, you can kind of look at your life and say, okay, hey, what might be missing? I'll say this, and I'll share. There are times when I think I execute well and I'm doing the right things. And, those lead measures, right? And the lag measure being, hey, I'm feeling pretty good and I'm executing well. And then there are times when it's just like, I'm just not feeling it. And sometimes those are just the ebbs and flows and rhythms of life. And there's not much to be done about it sometimes. But oftentimes it's really tied to your habits, your lifestyle habits, your mindsets, your self-care practices, things that quite frankly you can control. And that, to me, is a big part of our approach, our philosophy, right? It's about empowerment and ownership. And this notion that you've got more power, control, and agency over facets of your life than you might realize or want to believe or take responsibility for. But once you realize that and know what it is that you can do to bring about certain outcomes, the more empowered you're going to feel. And that's really important. So one of the things we talk about is the success path, right? And our approach, at Warriors Ascent, the 501c3, that Matt and I are both involved with, that helps veterans and first responders with post-traumatic stress. We like to say we put people on the path to healing. Certainly not the end all be all. Certainly not, hey, people spend days with us and their life is a cloudless sky going forward, of which you can attest to.
Right.
But, our notion is that what we show are tried and true methodologies, mental frameworks, self-care practices, that if nothing else, if you execute those diligently, you are going to be in a better place, no doubt. I'm never going to oversell it and say you'll be healed and your life is going to be awesome. No one's life is ever completely awesome. People always have setbacks. So, it says here, it's not the way, but a proven method. No magic or mysticism. It's not rocket science, just a tried and true methodology that works, but it only works if you work. So, Matt, please take it away.
I mean, I think that's the most true thing you could say. One of the things, not only do I work with Warriors Ascent, I'm on the board of Warriors Ascent, but I'm a graduate and an alumni of Warriors Ascent. And one of the things, and I go back to graduations, a powerful day. Every graduation I attend, to include mine, people get up, each person gives up and gives a testimonial to their newfound ways. And I know everyone means it. And when we leave that place, we all get on big group texts and we text amongst each other. And I'm about a year and 3 months out. And I'll tell you what, I'll make a guarantee to you, Mike. You won't guarantee anything, but I'll guarantee you.
Okay. Yeah.
If you don't work it, nothing will happen.
That's right.
I will promise you that. The guys that are still texting in the group that are doing well are doing the stuff we learned. They're staying consistent with it. The guys that are struggling are reaching out saying, help me, I need help. And we will say back, well, are you doing the meditation? Are you doing the breathing? Are you doing the journaling? Basically, are you working the system? And what we get is, crickets, because the answer is probably not. Because, this is it's a good method. And if you're doing it consistently over, you're going to get a result that's better than what you have right now. So there's nothing to lose in trying it, is the only thing I can say. But I make that one salesman guarantee. If you do nothing, nothing will change. Exactly. I think what Einstein, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and thinking you get a different result or outcome.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. So your circumstances will change only when you do, right? So that's very important. So as we've said, the program, the process, right? Trust the process, as we say, only works if you do. So that's.
In fact, I'm going to say it now because you said it at Mike, and when I was doing our workshop 5-day, and you said when things look like bad, and even after you've left here and you're doing all the work, and you got to take inventory, a true inventory of yourself and your behaviors, and say, do I need to double down? Because you do. Sometimes you're going to find out the key is to double down. That's what you said. When things are going bad, double down on the protocols. And, I left there, and I'm a person who professes that Warriors Ascent changed my life to the point where it saved my life. And, but it's not true unless I use the program. It's not just going to be a memory and then it's over with. I have to work the program in order to feel the same way I felt and get the positive outcomes I have.
No, absolutely, brother. No, so my friend Brian Johnson from Optimize, now Heroic, that's what he says, is when you're at your worst, when you're doing all these self-care practices, following a certain philosophy, whatever it might be, you're trying to optimize and flourish. But on those days where you're not feeling it and you're feeling despondent, and quite frankly, that's when most people will say, oh, this isn't working, or I'm not up to the challenge. And then they tend to either quit or reach for the donut or the beer, whatever it might be.
Right.
And what he'll say is that is not the time to quit. That is the time to not only continue to execute, but to double down on your protocols, because that's when you need it most. And for those that have the discipline to do that, that can say, when I'm at my worst, that is when I have to endeavor to be my best. And that's really when I need it most, which is hard, because that's exactly when you don't want to be doing, you want to feel sorry for yourself or just go, oh my God.
Yeah. And I think people in general, me included, would like to take the easiest method. We put here, there's no magic. Man, I just want some kind of magic pill for this, but there isn't one. The only magic is consistency and, doing it over and over. That's the only magic.
No, absolutely. So, in keeping with the holistic approach, that we advocate, right? So we'll talk mind, body, and soul, or spirit, right? So we start with, I'll say, the mind, and there's so much to it. Again, this is going to be very abbreviated because we covered this in a little bit more detail in previous episodes. This is just kind of, I'll say, an encapsulation of this. But then we'll also speak to the relevance, right? You'll make it real for us, the why, like, all right, why are we even talking about this?
Yeah.
No, so we'll start with what I'll call the metacognitive, thinking about your thinking. So in the Warriors Ascent program, right, our nonprofit, that first day will be very cognitive behavioral therapy heavy. And while not therapy, it's more psychodynamic education, psychoeducation. We'll tee up Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. And for those that aren't aware of, Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize, I believe, in behavioral economics with his work on System 1 and System 2 thinking. Say again?
He knows what he's doing.
Oh, no, he's a smart guy. Yeah. No, so he talks about System 1 and System 2 thinking and how your mind, your brain really functions. And this is I'll say a distillation, and in his book, he'll say, hey, this is a little imprecise, but to make it more usable, right? For those that aren't psychologists and neuroscientists, he says System 1 and System 2. System 1 thinking is your intuition, right? It's your quick, reaction. So he says it's intuitive, fast, automatic, effortless, emotional, and efficient. It's really almost more survival, right? So amygdala, lizard brain, various things like that. And, I think it transcends that. But by and large, it's the things that, case in point, you drive to work every day, same route. Do you have to think about every turn, every shift of the knob? No, you're on autopilot. It's an energy saving mechanism. By the same token, you hear a loud noise, you don't have to process that and go, that was a loud noise. That may have been a gunshot or something that's going to cause me harm. I should probably flinch or get it under the You don't think about it, you just do it. Again, it's a survival mechanism. System 2 thinking, on the other hand, different. Logic, reasoning. So it's effortful, right? So slow, conscious, deliberate, effortful, logical, and explicit. So in the book, Dr. Kahneman refers to System 2 as lazy System 2 because it's so very energy intensive. It's like solving a math problem. And I remember, in college at West Point, calculus and all the other stuff, when you get the problem in front of you, you're like, oh my God, that's going to be what a great big pain it's going to be to solve this very complex and comprehensive problem versus just guessing at an answer. Well, this answer looks about right? That's System 1. Well, here's the deal. System 1 can save you. You've got a few stories, in the aviation realm of, emergency procedures that saved you. That's the good thing, right? And again, that System 1 thinking, those reactions were born of your System 2 effort. Flight training, very effortful. Thousands upon thousands of hours in the cockpit to produce those System 1 reactions that saved you. And that's a good thing. The downside is sometimes those routine patterns of behavior that are now embedded in your System 1 don't serve you. It's the drinking, it's the blowing up at your wife and kids from a certain, statement or, whatever it might be. And I'd say the power of this is in knowing how those systems work and then how to address and remedy them when they've gone awry. So please, speak to some of your experiences.
And again, we talked about this and in the other episode about training so hard and so methodically and repetitiously that maneuvers become, they turn into system one thinking, even when you're in a horrible and emergency scenario. That, again, is one of these great things. But when I think what I have issues with and have had issues with and know people is I get that same sensation of an emergency occurring to me while I'm not in an emergency.
Right.
So it might be an anxiety attack, a panic attack. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm mad at something that happened in traffic. Somebody cut me off. I don't know. But for some reason, though I'm not in danger, my body thinks I'm in danger. So I got to come up with some method to fix this. And that's what I've discovered here, with Warriors Ascent and helping myself get into a position where I can, get into a more system two, thoughtful, effortful, oh my gosh, I don't really need to get into a fight with that guy because he didn't use his blinker. Or something silly like this. Right.
I mean, there's all sorts of mechanisms that, we won't go into right now, but they talk about, pre-commitment, right? If then implementation intention, wherein you realize these recurring patterns of behavior aren't serving you. And you're like, hey, when this happens, I'm going to do this instead of that. In cognitive behavioral therapy, they talk about the daily thought record, where you've got, a thought, an emotion, an action, and then an alternate thought. Like, all right, this thought led to a suboptimal action.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, what's another thought that I can replace the original with that might lead to a better action? So those are some techniques. And clearly, for the sake of this conversation, that's enlisting system two.
Right.
To help with the,
but and that's why I think it's important. One. Like these things, if you don't know about them, it's just like getting a little intel on your enemy before going into battle. You got to know a little bit what you're facing.
But IPB, intelligence preparation of the battle space. Woo.
So you go in there and kind of know what you're facing. You see it happening. Well, and I also have some tools or some techniques, protocols that I can go to alter the course and make a better outcome. And that for me is the power of learning this stuff right there, is what do I do about it?
That's perfect, brother. So another construct, right, related, right, is the cognitive behavioral therapy triangle, right? So this notion that your thoughts drive your emotions, which drive your actions. And you'll see in the diagram, the back and forth arrows obviously indicating that, it works the opposite way as well. I mean, your actions can impact your emotions. Your actions can impact your thoughts. Emotions impact thoughts and actions, clearly, no doubt. But, I'll say for the sake of system one and system two thinking, thoughts are so instrumental, critical, integral into, I'll say, driving all else. So many people think that their emotions or their actions or whatever it might be, they're just emergent. They just happen. That's just the way they are. That's just the way they're wired. And there's nothing that can be done. If you take nothing else from this episode, or at least I'll say the metacognitive portions of this episode, it's that for so many, I'm not going to say all, but really pretty much so many of your actions and emotions, there's a thought that underpins them. So whether it's root cause analysis, whatever it is you want to use, if you find yourself doing things over and over or feeling a particular way, really do that analysis and say, okay, what are the thoughts that underpin that? And if they're not serving you, if there's something that you want to change, you are not left to suffer that and say, well, that's just the way I'm wired. You have a hand in changing that. And that's system two, the logic and reasoning. And it all starts with your thoughts. But the first step is, number one, is realizing it, that, all right, hey. And that's where we see a lot of our students that come through. The light goes on and they're like, holy cow. And while I say no magic or mysticism, but for many, that really is an epiphany where they're like, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I do, in fact, see where I might be able to intervene and short circuit that so that I don't keep reacting in a certain way that results in the same suboptimal outcome.
Yeah, I think you said something that was interesting to me that sparked that things that aren't serving you. I used to have a self-talk that was very motivational, though negative. I would talk to myself and say, hey, you big bum, get up and do this. And I would say stuff like that to myself, and that would make me do things. And that was serving me because I was achieving goals. I was moving up the ladder. But suddenly when those were no longer serving me and I was just hearing, I'm a bum, I'm too fat, I'm too weak, I'm too injured, you're disabled veteran. Those are the kinds of things, and that quit serving me. And so then I had to recognize, boy, I talk to myself poorly. And, then you learn to talk to yourself more positively, and then you'll have more positive emotions, which will drive positive actions. You might even start hanging around with people that are more positive.
Well, you were talking about beliefs, right? So there's the, thoughts, which in our previous discussion we talked, I'll say a rough proxy for beliefs, or your thoughts over time, recurring thoughts lead to, a system of beliefs, in some cases limiting beliefs. You're talking about your back and how, man, hey, that hurt. And we've all been injured. We've all been like, oh man, I can't do the things that I used to be able to do, whether it be for a period of time or whether it be, hey, in perpetuity, hey, you're not that guy anymore. You're, 50 something years old. And you were sharing how, hey, your thoughts were, the doc said, hey, you're not going to be able to do this. And you're like, oh. But then through diligence, you overcame that.
Yeah. When somebody tells you you're disabled, it's like, okay, well, it becomes an excuse sometimes. I probably won't go do that because, I am a disabled veteran and my neck and my back are messed up pretty bad, or the doctors wouldn't have given me that designation, so it became my own excuse. And then I didn't want that excuse, so I went at it too hard and hurt myself. And then that became a problem. Now I'm hurt. See, I can't do the things anymore. Rather than changing the whole script, changing the whole thing and going, look, I need to do this, but I need to do this really slow, differently, methodically with some other expert to help me so that my outcome is like, I'm not trying to look like Arnold anymore. All I just want to do is be functional enough to do some things that I'd like to do to stay recreational or enjoy life, And that may just be ride an electric bike for, 4 miles, something silly that I would consider like super weak. It's like, hey, that's acceptable. And I can do that, if I build up to it. And if I, there's no limiting beliefs,
Right.
Now, if I don't have a leg, I'm never going to grow one or something. It can't be unrealistic.
Right. But you do other things. You're like, all right, hey, we're all dealing with, to a degree. It's just like, hey, we've got, memories of, man, I used to be able to do this or that. It's like, yeah, that dude is done. He's gone. You're trying to hold on, make peace with it. And I'm not trying to compare to, other people that have, we'll say grievous injuries and things like that.
Yeah.
And what they're contending with, I consider myself, pretty lucky, but I think everyone grapples at least to a point with, not being able to do things that they used to be able to do or things that they think they should be able to do, and making peace with the notion that that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. Just try to get better tomorrow, be better than you were today. And that's a victory, man.
Yeah. We talk about, you said at our program, we call it no social comparison, especially when we're doing yoga. And you see some big guys with no flexibility falling over and trying. And it's just like no social comparison. Or you look over and somebody else is just like doing it perfect. And you're like, dang,
right,
what's wrong with me? Maybe it's this giant gut in the way or something, But
right.
Ultimately, it's getting rid of limiting beliefs. And I think what you said is the greatest, is like judge yourself against who you were yesterday.
Yeah, and not focused on everyone else. That's a healthy mindset.
Yeah.
So next, we talk about the mind, right? So then there's the body, self-care, things of that nature. So one, metacognitive frameworks, right? Your mental state, which is very important, right? But then there's self-care practices, and we've teed this up previously. This notion of the flywheel, right? So we look at sleep, eat, move, and then breathe, which is, I'll say, cross-cutting to all of them. And the reason we like the metaphor of the flywheel is I'll say the circular aspect, the cyclical aspect, where a sleep begets, good eating habits, and we'll say movements and exercise. Bottom line is as an example, if you get a poor night's sleep and you're like, oh my God, I'm exhausted, what's the first thing you reach for? You reach for the donut, you reach for the carbs, you reach for the sugar, you're drinking coffee all day, which isn't good. So a bad night's sleep usually begets poor eating habits unless you've got iron discipline. By the same token, you're like, I don't feel like exercise. And you're like, unless, again, you've got the discipline and you know that, no, when I'm at my worst, I need to be at my best. And I'm not trying to say, hey, I execute perfectly, but even with a poor night's sleep, I realize, no, I got to move because that'll help, get me up and moving. But so many times you're like, I just don't feel like doing it. Whereas to the contrary, if I get a good night's sleep, then I've got more energy. I'm more attuned to what I'm putting into my body. And I don't feel this need for carbs and, over caffeination. Then I feel like moving more and exercising. I've got more energy to do that. So I get a great workout in, and of course, breathing, I say, is cross-cutting to all. So many people, we talked about that briefly, don't breathe properly. So, here's, I'll say, here's what'll make it real. You can live, a couple days without water, right? You can live a couple weeks without food, but you can only live, minutes without air? I mean, if that doesn't tell you how important that is. So breathing properly is absolutely essential and critical. And I'd say the two things that, as we discussed before, where people go wrong is they don't breathe, with their diaphragm, deep belly breaths. That's important. Number two is people do a lot of mouth breathing versus through their nose. And I think there's a lot of literature and, people are marketing all sorts of, different things to, make people breathe through their nose for sleep and things of that nature. But really, if nothing else, focus on your breathing, deep diaphragmatic breathing. And what's important about it too is it transcends your, sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, meaning, hey, it's an automatic function like your heartbeat, but you can also then commandeer it and say, okay, no, now I'm in control now and I'm going to breathe. And you can do that deep breathing. So that's one. Number two, the example I'll use is when people are under duress or stress, the indication is usually rapid, shallow breaths, like that. Well, when you're doing that, even when you're not under duress, your body still interprets it that way. So if you're not paying attention to it and you're like, why do I feel so agitated? And It's like, how's your breath? Whereas you could be under stress and you do the deep belly breaths, do 3 or 5 of them, then all of a sudden you're like, all right, I feel a little bit better. Well, there's a reason for that. There's what is it? The vagus nerve. Vagus nerve. They talk about vagal tone and things of that nature. What goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? No, but there's something to that, where you actuate that with deep belly breaths, the vagus nerve that again, from a neurological standpoint, will also help you. And then, just oxygenating your blood. I think what they say, lower lobes of your lungs, those deep belly breaths get that air in there as well. Bottom line is there's so many advantages to deep breathing that people
and you can discount. Just feel it.
Yeah,
you can just feel it.
No, so last thing, and then we'll take a quick break after this. Speak to the other, I'll say, power of that flywheel metaphor. So
again, it's like this. The flywheel is really cool because what it does is it slowly starts. It doesn't go from 0 to 6,000 RPM. It goes 0 to, and it slowly starts up, just like this. This seems so overwhelming, oh my gosh, there's nutrition, there's all this stuff.
There's too much to do.
If I don't sleep good, I can't eat good, then I'm not going to move good, and then I'm not breathing in a minute.
I've got to go from 0 to whatever.
How do I fix
split?
So what that is it just means this is super slow and incremental start as well. And I just start this slowly. But once it gains momentum, the ease of it just keeps going. And now there's no effort anymore because it's just on its own using momentum. And those little victories like that, when they see them in results, will gain momentum. You just will, So that's what I love about seeing the flywheel concept. It really hit home with me when you said it. The other thing about breathing through my nose, at basic training, a drill sergeant right in my face called me a open mouth breather. And I don't think he meant that I was intelligent.
That's right.
So from then on, try to breathe through my nose.
Yeah.
Perfect time to just take a break.
I think so.
After that, be back.
Mic check, 3, 2, 1. All right, brother. So we talked about the flywheel, eat, move, sleep, breathe. So let's break out, at least most of these, I'll say, constituent parts. So eat, why is nutrition important? When we talked previously, it's like, hey, when I was an SF guy, detachment commander, infantry, platoon leader, my mantra was all things burn in the fire of extreme activity. And while I was always pretty mindful of my diet, really, truth be told, I could eat whatever I wanted and I would burn that stuff off because we were just go, go, go. But now the older I've gotten, my mantra is now you can't outwork or outrun a bad diet. So watching what you eat is absolutely instrumental. I'll say to high performance, as we all know, recovery and all of that. So, as the slide shows, it, good food fuels your mind, and body to function optimally, both physically, cognitively, but here's the thing, even emotionally. So a lot of people don't realize that you've got more neurotransmitters in your stomach than you do in your head. And I was listening to a podcast that went so far as to say that the communication between, I should say, from your gut to your head is like something crazy, like 7 or 8 times that of the communication from your head to your gut. And for the longest time, people thought, well, yeah, there's two-way communication, but mostly your brain is instructing your,
other parts,
gastrointestinal tract and your stomach and all that stuff to digest and do its thing. But now I think people are realizing the communication is actually more the opposite. Long story short, watching what you eat is absolutely integral and instrumental to, I'll say, fostering an overall sense of well-being. I mean, those neurotransmitters, dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, right, impact your overall sense of well-being. So suffice it to say, if you're feeling off, and I think everyone's experienced that, they eat a heavy meal, and they feel like, oh my God, I want to go to sleep. Or worse, you get some indigestion or a meal doesn't sit right with you. You're not in a good mood at all. You're like, oh my God, this is just horrible. So
the fun is over.
The fun's over, man. Yeah. No, so paying attention to what you eat, I think everyone intuitively understands, body composition and aesthetic, physical performance, got it. But overall sense of well-being, it's every bit as important. So
yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's like food is kind of like a drug,
That's exactly it. I mean, and I'm reaching way back, but I think it's The Zone by Dr. Barry Sears. And there's so many. We'll talk a little bit about nutrition and diets, but I'm not a dietitian, nor are you. But there's a myriad of literature out there. But no, I remember Dr. Sears talking about exactly that, like eicosanoids and crazy stuff. But the one thing that I took away from that, or I'll say the major thing, was exactly that, is that food has like a hormonal effect on your body beyond just the macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and even micronutrients. But beyond that is just the hormonal effects on your body. Very much, food is in fact like a drug. It has hormonal, effects on your body. So staying attuned to what it's
you can tell if you've ever got clean and ate really well for I don't know how long, or been on Whole30 or something.
Right.
And you know that you feel great when you're eating that way. And so I don't know. It's just another thing where why would you put this bad fuel in this great machine? You know, you wouldn't ever take your dragster and fill it with, you know, diesel. You want to put the right fuel in the engine so it performs well, or doesn't destroy it. Like a diesel engine would be destroyed by gasoline. And so we do that all the time to our biological engines.
That's exactly it. And we all get it. You know, it's like, oh, it tastes so good. You know, so it was so good going down. Right. And then, you know, the difference is, you know, with the delayed gratification, you know, for those that are attuned to what it is they're putting in their bodies. It may taste so good going down and you satisfy those cravings. But on the back end, you know, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to pay for this. And to your point, I mean, when I'm eating very cleanly, if I have like a cheat meal, which is important. I mean, I'm not going to say, hey, tofu and bean sprouts for the rest of your life, and that's what it's going to take to enhance your sense of well-being. I mean, that's no life. But eat, you know, sensibly all throughout the week and have a cheat meal or 2 or 3 or whatever, but then get back on it. But I'll speak for myself on the days where I've done that, had like, you know, an ice cream sundae or some cheesecake. I mean, the next day I've got like low-level flu-like symptoms sometimes.
Yeah, you feel like you have a hangover.
Aching, my joints ache. Yeah, it's crazy. Right. So, you know, be mindful of that. It's like, hey, it was great, you know, during the meal. I was like, oh man, I feel so good. And I pay for it the next day. Yeah. You know, if not sooner, if not the half hour after. Now, so anyway, what constitutes, you know, a good or sound diet? So, lean meats, and that's chicken, fish, lean red meat, pork, things of that nature. Bottom line is you need some level of protein for repair. You know, I know there are people that are vegan, vegetarian, got it. You need protein in whatever form that takes. So that's important.
There's plant-based proteins, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, there's so many diets out there. Again, we're not nutritionists, we're not dietitians, so we're not going to advocate anything specific. But there are, I'll say, commonalities among some of the more mainstream diets, right? So there's keto, paleo, Mediterranean diet. You talked about Whole30 with the Hartwigs. I think they're the major proponents for that. And that's all about just kind of pulling out of your diet all the things that are known to be inflammatory, you know, milk, gluten, and then reintroducing those one at a time.
To see which one it is.
To see, in fact, if you do have an intolerance, you know, or you can get tested. Regardless, you know, the common themes in most all those diets have lean protein, vegetables, right? So complex carbohydrates, not starches, not pastas, but vegetables. And if you want to down even more, you know, they talk about cruciferous, you know, so broccoli, cauliflower, I think Brussels sprouts is in there, sprouts. You know, exactly. Little bit of fruit, right? Because fruit, although good for you, it's still a sugar. It's not sucrose, but fructose, you know, which you got to watch. Nuts and seeds, right? Good fats, you know, so that can be, you know, avocado, you know, in terms of nuts, you know, macadamia nuts. I mean, the list goes on, but stay away from the processed foods as a rule of thumb. Watch the pastas, watch the, you know, the grains or the, I should say flour. Stay away from processed. If it comes in a box, it's probably not all that good. You said that
when you go into a grocery store, there's a method.
Right. So rather than in the middle aisle, stay on the periphery, right? So that's where you're going to find produce. That's where you're going to find, you know, the butcher. You know, if it comes in a box and it's processed to the best of your ability, you know, if you can avoid it, you know, so that would be the rule of thumb. So that's diet and nutrition, very important. So next, movement or exercise, right? So we've got the FIT principles. Again, we can go into all sorts of details in subsequent episodes. We can bring some real, you know, SMEs or subject matter experts that do this for a living, have degrees in exercise physiology, and they can all go through periodization and energy system development, with the glycolytic phosphogenic oxidative energy systems and blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Or hey, but for this, we're just going to keep it very simple and use the master fitness trainer. You remember from the Army being a master fitness trainer? Yeah,
I didn't like those guys. They were mean to me
because they were mean and they made you do.
I was a warrant officer. I didn't go to PT.
Well,
I'm kidding. I did.
I know you did. You had to.
There's one or two chiefs in the formation
that didn't do that.
Yeah.
Right. No, so fit principles, right? So frequency, intensity, time, and type. So we'll just break that out ever so quickly. So frequency is, hey, how often you're exercising. Here's what I'll say. Of all of these principles, frequency is chief among them. It's like meditation as an example. I'll use that. You can meditate for 3 hours in a day and go, man, that was a really badass in-depth meditation practice. And you don't meditate for the rest of the month, it has done zero for you, right, or very little. You meditate for 10 minutes a day, every day. Now you're going to see some impact. You're going to see some outcomes.
And it's achievable to do that for 10 minutes.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with, the frequency in terms of exercise. You are much better served doing moderate exercise 3, 4, 5 times a week than you are killing yourself doing one of those CrossFit workouts once or twice a month. I mean, frequency truly is king. And as you pointed out, what's nice is, especially if you're an older person, guys like us, where it's like, I can do those exercises, the real intense ones, and then I'm sore and I pay for it and I'm like non-mission capable, after that, or you can say, hey, let me ramp up to that. Let me do something with more frequency, a little less intensity, and I'll build up to that. So that's important. Intensity clearly speaks to, how intense, and that can be measured in heart rate, perceived exertion, number of reps and sets, and load, in terms of resistance types exercises. But bottom line is, hey, how hard you're pushing yourself, right?
Like, so, did you get rabdo? I mean, did you really, did you really want it?
Oh, I know. No, man, I just want to be able to show up the next day, man. So time, right? The duration of the activity. And that's, I'll say, somewhat of a function of intensity, right? So, I mean, if you're pushing yourself to the max for a minute or 2 minutes, that's high intensity. That's going to be one of those high intensity workouts. If you're going for a long, slow, I'll say fat burning run at your aerobic threshold, hey, that's going to be lower intensity. Again, it enlists a different energy system, the oxidative or aerobic, and that's got to function clearly. So the time, right, and that's also a function of how much time you have available. And having come off of like a heavy half marathon in Leadville, I mean, there's a little bit of a time investment there, and there are times when running for 2.5, 3 hours is a great big pain to build your oxidative base. Luckily, my wife and kids understood, and they're like, yeah, no, we get it. Suffer now or suffer later in the mountains. Yeah. So there it was. But some people may not have 3 hours. So maybe about 30 minutes of a little bit more moderate intensity a couple times a week may serve you.
Right.
It's all about your training outcomes, and it's all about, what it is you have available. And then lastly, type. So cardio, that's important, right? So whether that's walking, biking, running, swimming, rucking, whatever it might be, but something that's going to raise your heart rate. That's important. And then strength and resistance. I mean, this for young guys and older people too, really for, quality of life, because people begin to lose muscle mass. Yep. And as you progress into your later years, that's not a good thing. That's how people, when they fall, they break stuff. So maintaining strength is important. So that's, you can do body weight exercises, free weights, machines, whatever it might be. Bottom line, major takeaway in terms of type, do a little bit of cardio, do a little bit of resistance. And if you want to pair the two with like a circuit, circuit training,
right,
hey, that's great. CrossFit, whatever it might be. So the other thing we talked about, right, was not only is it just the physical performance, right, and being able to, achieve certain physical goals, but we talked about exercise and mental well-being. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, so struggling with a bad back, bad neck. I'm the kind of guy that overdid things and injured myself, and then the recovery took so long that the next time I went to do something, I injured myself to the point where I believed, oh, I can no longer do this activity. And so I can no longer do anything like that activity. Then it starts going back into that CBT triangle where I start thinking bad emotions, and my thoughts are like, well, fine. Next thing you know, you're sitting on the couch growing a big midsection.
Right.
In reality, what I've discovered I just got sick of not being able to do things is I got to do something about strengthening my core or something so I won't hurt my back. And found somebody that could do that for me and give me the right stuff. And so I go in to do these things, and it's like exercises I've never done with weights that are embarrassingly low. And I just thought, I got to throw out what I always thought of exercising and lifting weights. I'm not trying to be Arnold. I'm just trying to be a guy that can go out and ride a bike a little bit. That's it. Or, do other things. And what I'm finding is, the flywheel effect is that little by little, I'm getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And oh, by the way, I start seeing, man, I'm doing a little more stuff and it's not hurting me. So it's working. So dang, results are, again, that builds momentum. I'm a little off right now because we went on a vacation and some stuff like that.
That's natural. That's forgivable.
But we'll jump right back on the bandwagon again. And just, what I found was like, the other thing was just showing up. You just got to show up.
That's Weider's number. So you talked about Arnold, right? So Joe Weider, trainer of champions, one of, I think, Arnold's trainers or managers or whatever, his rule number one is show up. And there's, and rule number two, squat deep, right? No, but rule number one, believe there's real genius there for a variety of reasons. One, even on the days where you're like, I am not feeling it, I don't want to work out, but you force yourself to show up. In other words, getting back to the cognitive behavioral triangle.
Yeah.
Your thoughts might be, I don't want to do this. Your emotions might be, I'm just not feeling it. But your actions are like, no, I'm going to show up and make that commitment. And then what happens? You show up, and then...
Even if you're kind of languishing through the first part of the exercises, next thing you know, you start doing better. At the end of it, walking away going, man, do I feel so happy that I did this.
Because exactly. There's so much to that. Number one, you show up and you're like, all right, I'm going to go through the motions. And then what happens is you actually have a better workout than you think more often than not. And even on the days where you're like, I wasn't feeling it and I'm still not felt like I'm legitimately sick or something. Okay, great. But you at least did something. That's one. But what you're tapping into is the psychological component of honoring a commitment to yourself. And that's tied into your beliefs, right? Thoughts and beliefs and your belief system. So rather than having limiting beliefs, now you've proven to yourself that when I set a goal or I make a commitment to myself, I honor it. And even if I'm just showing up and doing something, I'm staying true to that commitment that I made to myself, which is powerful.
I think in another time we talked about when we were taking a personal inventory of whether are we truly doing everything we can. The one person you don't want to lie to is your dang self. Why are you lying to yourself? Nobody else is going to know. You got to do, you just got to do it for yourself. And that self-commitment is, I think, I'm the first person that I will cheat on at the same time, but you got to get that mentality differently.
No, man, that's key. That is key. But there's another component to this as well, beyond even the psychological, right? So it's been said, right, that a bout of exercise, I'll say particularly cardiovascular, but bottom line is, hey, if you're raising your heart rate, respiration, all of it, that counts, right? Whether you're lifting weights or running. But a good bout of exercise is like a little bit of Ritalin and a little bit of Prozac, so they say. And studies have shown that it has the same types, of effects that, it helps, I'll say, calm people down and center them, but also focus them at the same time.
Well, think about this. You do some cardio, you're going to do some deep breathing. Deep breathing, we just discovered, is good for your vagus nerve, all this stuff. This is all huge cycles of different interconnecting things.
I think there's something to that as well. Exactly. You feel like, all right, you're taxed, your respiratory system, you're like, whew. But no, I'll say beyond just the physical performance piece and wanting to, all right, hey, achieve certain goals, whether it's strength development goals or moving at a certain rate. I just feel better. I'll say anecdotally, beyond the research and the literature, I come off a good run or a good workout and I just feel so, so much better. So really, the point that I want to impress upon everybody is, if you're like, I'm not an athlete, I don't care about that. I'm not looking to run marathons. That's great. I'm not doing CrossFit. I'm not grappling BJJ. I don't care about this stuff. Okay, that's fine. What I'm saying is exercise is so inextricably linked with your overall sense of well-being that if you're not exercising, you're denying yourself the ability to really tap into a natural mechanism to,
feel better.
Right. No, exactly. All those same endorphins and neurotransmitters and all of that. You have that at your disposal for free. All you've got to do is exert yourself.
Yep.
So last thing we'll speak about is self-actualization. So Abraham Maslow says what one can be, one must be, right? And he's given us the triangle here, right? So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So just very quickly, you've got your physiological needs at the bottom, food, water, all of that. Your safety needs, all right, you're safe from predators, right? Belongingness. So, hey, you've got family, friends, people that care about you. Esteem needs, accomplishment that, hey, you're effective. You're a somewhat successful person. But at the very pinnacle, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, is the need for self-actualization, right? It's this notion that you have a higher purpose than just, existing or making the donuts or whatever it might be. And that all other things being catered for. If you're not paying attention to that self-actualization, that's self-fulfillment, you're really denying yourself total well-being, right? And the key to that is really tapping into this notion of, hey, what was I put on this earth for? What am I good at? What am I here for? Where do my propensities lie? And then fulfilling that to the best of your ability. We had another episode where we went into, a whole lot of detail with the Venn diagrams. What are you good at? Right. What do you love to do? And, what can you make a living at, or, hey, pay the bills, whatever it might be. Because if you're doing nothing more than just pursuing hedonic pleasures that I'm great at drinking beer.
Yeah.
I'm great at drinking beer and I love it. Well, unless you're like a taste tester for,
Bud Light
or whatever, right? You're probably not going to make a living.
Somebody
So you best find another vocation. So self-actualization. Speak to that, brother. In terms of your life.
Like in this last podcast that we did about this, I really scratched my head about it, and I buy into this. I don't know if it's because Maslow or not, but I have I sat there. I retired from the Army. I had the acreage with the farm, with the chickens to calm me and the honeybees to make me feel good. And I had the Claymore mines all around the perimeter and the landmines.
Well, that's good.
IEDs ready for anybody who'd breach my security, but they shouldn't. But, I'm sitting there, not really worried financially. Basically could do whatever I needed to do, and instantly miserable. And it's not, I feel terrible about that because there's people all over the world in the third world nations that didn't have close to what I had. And I knew this. It made me feel horrible that I hadn't served on behalf of something bigger than me, like I'm used to. And that's what I think I was really missing. And I know that once you put that purposeful thing in there, and it may even be a small thing, it may be an interim one just to get you through until you figure out what it is. But you should always have something at the top of that at that pyramid, trying to figure out what you can be. Why are you on this crazy place we call Earth? And it doesn't have to be a religious thing. It doesn't have to be at all. It just is something that fulfills your need to be around. Like, what am I here for? Not just to steal oxygen.
So it's like Viktor Frankl, right? Psychologist. survived the Holocaust, right? His book, Man's Search for Meaning. So meaning is so very important, and without meaning, I've heard it said that not being needed is a slow death for a man, which is interesting when you think about it. When you're made to feel that I'm dispensable, I'm not
I can
needed.
believe in that.
And all of a sudden you're like, holy.
Especially if you had been needed heavily and suddenly
At one time and no longer are.
Yeah, and suddenly like in a retirement scenario, especially in the military where we retire young. And the intent of retirement isn't that we'll ever stop working. It's just that we aren't working for the Army anymore. It's so that cutting it off, though we look forward to it, we discuss it for years. That's the pie in the sky. That's the goal, is get all the way to retirement. That was another thing for me, is I made it all the way to retirement. Almost, I missed out on the very top rank as a warrant officer. But still, like all these goals all along the way were being met. And then there's no further goal beyond retirement. It's like, then I just live this incredible life going off into the sunset.
Right.
And then, you see unit mates go, you see the old crusty chief go, you see the, colonel go away, the sergeant major go away. Don't hear from them again. And you just think they're out there running around on the farm with little Timmy, and they're not. They're, some of them hopefully are engaged in something.
Yeah. I mean, it's the notion that, life is not a destination, it's a journey. So it's not, all right, I've arrived, this is my life. It's like, no, man, it's a journey. But there's something else that you tapped into, which is in the service, where what is taken from someone when they leave the military or law enforcement or fire department, EMS, whatever it might be. Number one, I think there's that tribe. That sense of tribe, that
Absolutely.
People understand me, they're like me, they have the same value system.
We speak the same language.
There's the same language, same lexicon. That's important as well. But here's the other thing too. Now that you mention it, is aside from the tribe, it's being a valued member of the tribe. In other words, being having meaning, right? Not only in your life, like, hey, this is meaningful to me, but being meaningful and useful to others. And then all of a sudden, when you're no longer A, part of the tribe, or B, you're not a contributing member, like people are depending upon you. People respect you for your value and what you bring. And when it's just like, we don't need you anymore.
And it's like, this place couldn't run without me. And
it does. The big green machine's always going to go on.
Yeah.
No, but I think people really discount the deleterious effect that has on your psyche and emotional state. This notion of no longer being a critical part of the team or being needed.
At a relatively young age.
Right.
In your 40s, could be 38 if you did it at 18 and did 20 years, so.
That's true. All right, brother. I think that wraps up. I'll say this season, right? So the hope is, we did a recap of all the lessons. If there's anything that appealed to anyone in the audience, please go back, look at the other episodes. And, I think we did a little bit more in depth for each of those. This was just kind of a very superficial treatment. And teeing up for next season, well, geez, we'll do, I'll say more of the same. The hope is that we'll have some subject matter experts, some guests. We'll speak about the same basic facets. Hey, mind, body, soul, fortitudo, prudentia, and gravitas.
What's really important to us too is we take this information and we figure out how to implement it. What's the how and the why of giving this information to a person so that they can take that, implement actual action, and produce an outcome that's valuable. And that's
not just the bog sat, right? The bunch of guys sitting around talking,
right.
but something actionable. Yes.
That's
valuable.
Right. And that's the value I got out of going to a Warriors Ascent cohort. And again, just continuing to work the system when everything's, you said each episode.
Trust the process,
bad things happen to good people. So you got to know how to recuperate.
That's right. Trust the process. All right, so we
Thanks,
will
Mike.
be back, next episode, next season. We are looking forward to it. And
Should we do a little call to action and say,
call to
come
action.
on.
Hey, tell
you
your
got it."
friends. I mean, if
Yep.
you found this useful, please, by all means, tell your friends, share the episode, and give us some feedback in terms of, hey, what you liked, what you didn't like, and what we could do better. With that said, we'll see you next episode. Appreciate you.
Pounds.
Boom.
Hi, Matt Hastings here, sending a thank you for watching this episode of the Warriors Ascent podcast. We strive to build a community of warriors made up of our nation's veterans and first responders. And to reach as many of those in need as possible, we need your help. Please just smash that like button and comment or share our content. Warriors Ascent is a Kansas City-based nonprofit that aids veterans and first responders with PTS. I went through this effective program and want those that are struggling to find what I found. Check us out on our website at warriorsascent.org.